Shir is dedicated to Nishmas Rachalei Bas Chaim Tzvi. I'm going to start a new topic today in today's shir. Again, what I'm trying to lead to is to get to the topic of opening up packages, but we need one last malacha. And this malacha, I think, will take us a little more than one shir, and that'll set us up then towards dealing with that very, very controversial and complex topic of opening up packages. But today, I wanted to at least begin our exploration of the malach of Korei'a. Now, logically speaking, it might be smarter for me to first discuss Meleches Tofer and then Meleches Korei'a, because the two are indeed brother-sister malachos. Tofer means to sew, and literally you take two separate garments, and through the intermediary of the thread, you bring those two garments together to make guf echad. You take two separate things through a sewing process, and you make guf echad. Now, Korei'a is really in a certain sense, a prerequisite for Meleches Tofer. It is the opposite of Tofer, but as the Mishnah tells in Masechah Shabbos Apayin Gimel, it's Korei'a al menas litfor, and it is a prerequisite to Meleches Tofer, because how was it done in the Mishkan? So the Gemara tells us that you had a Uriah, one of the a Uriah. How do you translate Uriah? One of the drapes, one of the wall hangings, the hangings of the Mishkan. Shenafal badarna. You had a moth, something that put a hole in the Uriah. So now you need to sew it. But if you have a regular, ordinary hole, to sew that up is not going to come out very nicely. So what did you do? You was to tear the Uriah further to make it now something you could work with and now stitch up in a very, very nice fashion. And that, says the Gemara, was the source of Meleches Korei'a and the Mishkan. Uriah shenafal badarna. So it was a kriya, you're tearing, and the tearing was al menas litfor, for the sake of tefira. Kriya al menas litfor is how it was done in the Mishnah. Now, of course, a very, very famous issue, the one that we have discussed, but there are a number of al menas malachos in that Mishnah Daf Ayin Gimel. You have, for example, mochek al menas lichtov. You have Korei'a al menas litfor. The Gemara describes Masechah Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph Beis Soter is al menas livnos. So you do have these al menas malachos. And how serious do we take that? What is the reason that Kriya has to be specifically al menas litfor? There's two ways of looking at it. One way to look at it is the more machmir way. The more machmir way is to say, you know what? These al menas malachos really have one theme in common. Soter and Korei'a and mochek. What do they have in common? They're all meleches kilkul. They're all malachos of destruction. They have a destructive quality to them. And therefore, in order to be chayav on Shabbos, we know the Gemara in Shabbos Av Kuvav tells us, kol ha'mekalkalim p'turin, that any malacha of kilkul is in general potter. Meleches HaMishkan was constructive activities. Meleches machshavas asra Torah ma'isa uman, and these malachos, by their very nature, have a kilkul quality to them. Therefore, how can you be chayav? So what do we need to do? We need to convert these malachos shel kilkul into malachos of tikkun. And how do we do that specifically? Well, if it has a productive agenda, if it's an al menas litfor, if it's an al menas lichtov, al menas livnos, so now this is really just a preparatory stage to something bigger and greater. It's not kriya destructive, it's a kriya to facilitate tefira. And it's not a mechika destructive, to destroy something. It's to create a workable paper that now you can write on. So to soja al menas livnos, and then these become meleches of tikkun. But if that's true, then if that's all it is, and if I can construct a scenario whereby the mechika or the kriya is constructed, even if it's not al menas lichtov or al menas litfor, then I'll be chayiv as long as it's a malacha of tikkun. That's one approach. The other approach is to say, no. How was mochek done in the Mishkan? Al menas lichtov. How was Korei'a done in the Mishkan? Al menas litfor. That's the definition of the malacha. And therefore, even if you have a malacha of kriya shel tikkun, but it's not al menas litfor, it might be nisa d'rabbanan, but that's not the malacha. The malacha is defined specifically as al menas litfor. You could argue that if it's just a way of generating a malacha shel tikkun, to tell you need malachas of tikkun, so the malacha's name is Korei'a. And you wouldn't have to say al menas litfor. That's the general halacha, that malachos need tikkun, have to be melechas tikkun, not melechas kilkul. So why did it have to be in the Mishnah specifically almanas litfor? It could be any kind of almanas latakin, which the bottom line is true by all melachos. Perhaps one could argue that the fact the Mishnah, which names the melachos, ha-choresh, ha-zoreya, ha-boneh, and says ha-korei'a almanas litfor, maybe that would be indicative of the fact that it must be almanas litfor, and if it's almanas latakin, Shalom and Azlit for, that would not be sufficient. So there's a major machlokas harishonim. And it's discussed in detail in the Bir Halacha, in Siman Shin Mem at the end, Halacha Yedalit. But let's take a look at a fascinating Tosfos. We saw this Tosfos a number of times already, just have to bring it back because it's such an important Tosfos. But the Gemara tells us in Masechet Shabbos Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, Hazomer v'tzarech la'etzim chayev shtayim. If a person is zomer, he prunes, and he needs the eitzim.